Hello, welcome to Sterlo's Wrap.
Straight rhythm!
Bang, take advantage of it.
Stand and applaud.
It's a stupid question.
It's
I
not.
have far greater expectations of you than that.
Oh, yes. He's gone all the way.
Now, he's popular, he's a great leader, he's the mentality of this football team.
Oh, and another one from Cleary.
Well, it doesn't get much better, does it?
Absolutely outstanding, and the finish is just as good.
It's rugby league, isn't it?
Hello, welcome to Sterlo's Wrap of round 20. I'm glad we're here with something to talk about. It was up in the air for a little while whether we'd even get any football over the weekend, but Peter Sterling, after a day off on Saturday, I'm glad that we had round 20 at all. It's a bit tenuous about what's going to happen going forward, but congratulations to the NRL for even getting a game on the field.
Absolutely, very much so. And whilst we had Saturday off, blast from the past, we had Monday night football back in. So, yeah, fantastic, especially when you considered that the advice from the Queensland Health Minister, I think Janet Young, was that no football to be played. To actually have 24 hours later 3 games played at Suncorp Stadium was remarkable, really. And obviously there'll be plenty of meetings this week with the lockdown being extended into Queensland as to how, what the ramifications possibly will be next week. Is something that I'm sure that the Landys and Abdo will take on board. And even things, Matt, the wear and tear on a place like Suncorp Stadium. There are a lot of games played there last weekend. That's going to have to be juggled as well. So, but unbelievable to get a full round in last week, and it gives you great confidence that we are going to get through the next 5 into the last month. All of them, I would imagine, north of the border.
Yeah, and given how trying it is at the moment, to have a society without rugby league would be almost unbearable, Pete. So let's hope we can keep things going.
Well, the Olympics finish shortly as well, so...
Can we extend the Olympics for another little while?
Well, no, we had to wait 5 years for this one.
Yeah,
Fortunately, only 3 for the next one.
Yeah.
But, yeah, look, the footy's been great. I think what did give me confidence is the fact Eagle Farm races were on up there on Saturday in Brisbane. So,
yes, right.
And we have great protocols around the game, and that's been built up over 18 months. So despite the fact we probably dented our trust going to the Queensland government with things that have happened within the game, the fact that we can point out that we are very, very safe with the way we put on a game without crowds, and proved it on the weekend.
All right, let's get into the wrap. Sunday, the grand final rematch, Storm 37 over the Panthers 10. Melbourne pretty much at full strength without big Nelson Asafa-Solomona, who was rested from this game. The Panthers, however, Pete, as we know, missing a whole contingent of players, among them probably their 4 most influential players in Cleary and Coruscant, Fisher-Harris and Isaiah Yeo. They'll get a couple of them back this week. Is your assessment a couple of days after that result?
Yeah, look, I'm going to throw Brian To'o in there as well. The ground that he makes coming out of their own end is one of the foundations for Penrith. Tyrone May missing. I think I said in commentary, it was comprehensive, clearly, for Melbourne, but it didn't get too ugly for Penrith, and that was important for them. Ivan Cleary, came out and said that it wasn't good enough, and that the points that they conceded were particularly disappointing. But I saw enough there that they created enough chances against Melbourne to think that when they get those other players back, there's probably not going to be a whole lot between these two sides. So, we didn't get the glimpse, I think, of what we were hoping to. When we were looking forward to the calendar in this game and thinking, wow, what a clash this will be. It didn't eventuate because of the players missing, but we still saw enough of it. What is scary for opposition teams is that Melbourne, who have now won a club record 16 games straight, are even going to get stronger personnel-wise when you consider Harry Grant came back last weekend, Pappenhausen, his second game back. Now, Harry Grant...
It's like he'd never been out.
He's phenomenal. This is a young bloke who's still... He's a rookie when it comes...
26 first-grade games, I think, from memory.
It's crazy the way that he can come in and just pick up off injury, and he was outstanding. And Ryan Pappenhausen was much better and certainly less hesitant in Game 2 than he was last weekend. So I've sort of looked ahead, and I'm making the prediction that I think that Craig Bellamy, when we get to finals football, he will start with both Harry Grant and Ryan Pappenhausen. So if that is the case, what that means at full strength, coming off the Melbourne bench into finals football, with that man there, Ryan Pappenhausen, at fullback, means that Nico Hines goes to the bench, Brandon Smith goes to the bench, Asafa-Solomona starts off the bench, and Tui Kamikamica comes off the bench.
Not bad.
Now, how good is that? the strike there. Brandon Smith, I don't know how he would embrace that, but that's, I suppose, the juggling act for Craig Bellamy, is to make sure that all players are happy. We know that Brandon Smith wants to start, and he wants to start in 9. But I just think the big games that Craig Bellamy has shown enough in the past that he likes Harry Grant starting the game, and Smith with Finucane in 13 as a run-on comes off, and after 20 minutes, both he and, well, Sofa Solomona and Tui Kamika, that's hard to stop.
Pete, they have a rare ability to just run teams out of the game in the first 15, 20 minutes, Melbourne. They've done that time after time. They did it in the grand final against the Panthers last year. I'm going to throw you the number 7 jumper again. Tell me, what's the game plan to avoid Melbourne blowing you away early in the match? Because that's, come finals time, that's going to be the task confronting the teams.
Well, it's interesting you ask that, because I asked Phil Gould the same thing in commentary last week. Phil Gould, one of our greatest ever coaches, and he said for teams to combat Melbourne, they have to be starting now to put together an attack or a plan as to how to beat Melbourne. Might not be the one that best suits them against the team next week or the week after, but what can beat Melbourne. I think in the past, we've seen that sides that have troubled Melbourne have moved the football around. So it's a balancing act. You can't come up with errors against Melbourne, but you've got to move their defence around, because defensively, their structures and their understanding is so good that they can close you down. That's why they are the best starting team in the competition. They come out, they get out of the blocks, they put a lot of pressure on their defence, they force mistakes, they get the ascendancy, and then they run up points. So you've got to throw something at Melbourne that makes it difficult for them to defend the way they like to defend, and you've got to do that without coming up with errors and giving all the momentum to them. I think that move the football around, and I think you kick early against them. You turn them around. You get the ball down into the corners. So you've got to be courageous with that. It's not easy to kick the football to Melbourne on second, third, fourth tackle, but I think that's what you do, and it's something that Penrith are prepared to do. We've seen it. There was a game a few weeks ago where Nathan Cleary was playing, where they had no football for the first 20 minutes. First time they got in the opposition half, he kicked down Stephen Crichton, scored from it. That's the way you've got to play Melbourne. You've got to make them work defensively and in an uncomfortable way for them. And you've got to turn them around at the same time.
Because teams are too scared to give them possession, aren't they? So you're saying you've got to throw caution to the wind with that and kick long and make them play off their own goal line.
Yeah, and when you've got the football, you've got to move their defence around. But you've got to do so and not make errors. So you've got to be a really, really good side to put that all together. But there are a couple of sides in this competition who are capable of doing exactly that.
So you're saying, just to wrap this game up, if they meet again later in the season, which I think most people would expect they will, you're saying game on?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There were only 8 players in the Penrith lineup who played in last year's grand final. Throw in another 6. All of a sudden you're getting back to the team that was so good last year and went so close.
Okay. Problems for Parramatta here. Roosters very good. 28, Parramatta 0. Let's start with the positive with the Roosters. Since they got flogged by Melbourne, they haven't lost a game. No, and to find them to have the distinct possibility of finishing inside the 4 again this year is just a remarkable effort. They've
had second rowers playing in the centres. Joey Manu was on the wing on the weekend, still ran for over 200 metres. It's a remarkable coaching effort, but also...
The most number of players ruled out for periods of 5 weeks or more in the competition this year. I think they've had like 12.
Yeah.
So like 12 long-term injuries.
Yeah, and quality players. Yeah. But the depth of the squad is great. The way that they are coached is superb. And the way that the players have reacted. I've got to say, when a player like Luke Keary went down... you almost get the black texture out. He has such an influence. And then Drew Hutchinson plays against Parramatta. He gets wiped out. You're thinking, well, he might be gone. He's come back into this side, and the steadiness of his play, but also the fact that he's got great vision as well. Like he looks like a back rower. He hasn't had a lot of first-grade experience, but the steadying influence he has on this football team and on Sam Walker. And we've got a young bloke up there who's just finding his way in the NRL. The person alongside him is so important for him. Drew Hutchinson is just like this, like calming influence there. He's got a good left foot kicking game, strong defender. So they lose a Keary, who's a kind of player who can win you a premiership and has done for 2 clubs. Drew Hutchinson has come in under a lot of pressure and he's been fantastic for them. But, that's probably the way that you can gauge all of the Roosters players. They've just gone to another, a guy like Tupanua, kind of a back rower who was coming through. Now he's had to, with Boyd Cordner out of the side, he's had to mature quicker. And he has done. So Trent Robinson a couple of weeks ago said that he saw embers in their performance. And with Trent Robinson, that's a sign of confidence that can grow into a fire. And their better football is yet to come. So they've done a fantastic job with so many setbacks in regards to players. And
Josh Morris is looking at 4 or 5 weeks now too.
Yes. Billy Smith not there for them. So I think Dale Copley has actually come into their roster now. So and he'll do a job for them because that's just what happens at the Tricolours.
All right, Parramatta.
Yeah, they're poor, really poor. To get beaten by that scoreline against a weakened Roosters lineup with so much on the line, like it's a top 4 spot. They are now on the same amount of competition points. Parramatta are still 4th, and I don't want to get too far ahead their run home, but they got South next week. They finish with Melbourne and Penrith. So, the job is a difficult one. Mitchell Moses, I expect, will be back this week, and he's not going to be the panacea. He's not going to solve all their problems, but there are aspects of their game. And their kicking game has been so good all year, and Mitchell Moses has been a big part of that. But, they just, in this game, they just got the kicks wrong and kicked at the wrong time. And against the top sides, you can't have that happen. They forced an error every now and then, but the kicks through were just, they weren't right. The Roosters had them covered. If the kick had gone through, they either went dead or they didn't put the desired pressure on or keep the pressure on. So I just thought the kicking game was pretty poor from Parramatta. After they'd made so many errors in the opening 20, 25 minutes, they had to get that part of their game right. And again, it was just another area that they weren't where they needed to be.
Friday night footy, the Broncos. They're going okay, Brisbane. It's been a great turnaround from last year. Well done to Kevin Walters and everyone up there over the Cowboys. 37-18. It was another high-scoring game. I think the positive out of this year, Pete, is that Kevin Walters has exposed some of these younger players to NRL footy, and some of them are starting to show that there's a real future there. You bring in the recruits that they've got coming to the club next year, and suddenly they're a different looking proposition, and there's a bit of optimism for the Brisbane fans.
You put Adam Reynolds in there, and all of a sudden they just look very, very different. And I agree with you. And I think we all saw that there was going to be a lot of short-term pain for long-term gain by the fact that there were so many young players in there, and they didn't have a lot of direction, and they've tried so many halves combinations. And Gamble was great on the weekend, but again, he hasn't played a lot in the top grade, and sometimes there's not the consistency that you need from your 6 and your 7 there. But we're starting to see the green sprouts start to blossom a little bit more. A guy like Jordan Ricky is a perfect example. He was great in this game. So they've got these young players coming through. You've just got to now get the right roster around them, and I think Ben Ikin has made a difference in going up there. Now they've made some big decisions when you consider Matt Lodge, Anthony Milford, and Pangai Jr. So and what that has done, that will free up maybe not a whole lot of money, but they'll be getting the right players to put in that roster that they believe they need to go ahead. So some good signs for them. The unfortunate thing out of this game was the fact that Katoni Staggs is now finished for the year. We've hardly seen Katoni at all this year, unfortunately, but the times he's been there, the dynamism in his game is clear. Like, he's a little bit like your Justin Olam, isn't he? He's just the power-weight ratio, speed ratio is superb.
Makes things happen, doesn't he? He
does. And again, a decision will be made as to where he's best served. Is he a number 6? I tend to think he's a centre for maybe a number of years yet. I like the fact he's just that little bit wider, doesn't have the responsibility of playmaking. He's just an explosive man with the football in hand, and get it to him. And, he can do damage. But unfortunately for Brisbane, won't be there for the next 5 rounds.
They're going to cause a bit of nuisance value towards the last few weeks of the year.
Yeah, they'll move up the ladder next year. Absolutely no doubt. Now we just have to wait and see how far they can go up.
Sunday footy, Newcastle back in the finals race, 34-24 over Canberra. Great stuff from the Knights. Bradman Best, a standout for Newcastle. A very costly loss, this one, for the Raiders.
Yeah, look, and after 3 straight wins, you thought that the Raiders had got that momentum and were on a roll, but this was a really poor performance, taking nothing away from Newcastle, who went into the game without Mitchell Pearce once again. And I think Newcastle have shown this year that they are a team that have needed their best side on the paddock every week. Now, when you consider that they win on the weekend without Mitchell Pearce, probably belies that a little bit. But if I go back through, if you'd have said to me at the beginning of the season, who are the three most dangerous players for Newcastle? I say Kalen Ponga, I say Mitchell Pearce, and I say Bradman Best.
Yep.
Have not played a game together all year. They've not had those three players on the field at the same time. Best comes back on the weekend. I don't think it's any coincidence that Chihuahua scores a hat-trick on that side of the field. This young man is an absolute beast. Unfortunately, I think he's still growing into his body, and with that comes sort of leg injuries and ankle problems at times because he's such a big man and the body's trying to catch up with that. But if they can get him out there consistently, you add Mitchell Pearce to this. They're actually, we'll have a look at the ladder later with 5 rounds to play. The Newcastle Knights are actually now one of 5 teams on the edge of, and if they can get all of those players back, with Clifford starting to settle in even more so, the Saifiti brothers are playing some great footy. They're there. They're thereabouts.
Well, they're going to have to win their way into the finals.
Well, everyone's going to have to do that.
Ladder, but 8 wins for the season. When I say win their way into the finals, I mean for and against isn't going to help them. They're minus 147. So they're a long way behind the teams ahead of them in terms of differential.
So what you're saying, and it's exactly right, is that the more you win, the better that differential gets. While other teams are losing, the worse theirs gets. So hopefully that will equate out for them. But they are behind the 8 ball at the moment. But they are, again, we'll have a look at it a little bit later, but there are now 5 teams vying for 7th or 8th position. They are one of the 5.
Yep, indeed. The Titans are in the top 8.
They're
in 7th, 34-6 over the Bulldogs. They can score some points. The Gold Coast. If they make the finals, you wouldn't want to play them in week 1.
We've spoken about the Titans so often, in the past as to they do things that are different to other teams. They attack from areas that other sides hit one up. And it's from kicks, it's from restarts. We saw Sam Lasoni threw a couple of absolute pearl passes on the weekend. One of them to Fortuaker, his front row partner, who went straight through. Brimson is such a danger from the back. I thought he was probably the best player on the field.
But Ash Taylor's going well.
Well, Ash Taylor, it's interesting because there was a lot of talk coming into this game. If Jamal Fogarty was fit and available, then there was a bit of a murmur around that Ash Taylor might have been the player to miss out and that Toby Sexton would be retained. Right. Now, as it turned out, Fogarty wasn't available, so Sexton was alongside Ash Taylor. And Ash Taylor, there are some... You look at parts of his game and it's just surrounded by class. He puts a kick through for Brian Kelly. He backs up to score a try after, again, throwing the key ball. A cut-out pass he threw in the first half, cut out 3 players, hit the winger on the chest in space. Boy, if he can maintain that consistency...
Well, you've got to remember, they signed him...
That pass, yeah. What about that? That's
brilliant.
That pass from
They signed him for 5 years on big money after he played 20 minutes of first grade at Brisbane. So, clearly, there is potentially an elite player in there somewhere.
It's there. That little package there, just... Yeah, wonderful. But then we don't see the other stuff where he gets things wrong. So the decision for Justin Holbrook now will be that halves pairing going into the coming weeks. I think Toby Sexton, who has been very good in his first 2 games, he was tremendous against the Dragons, scored a try, was really neat, and he backed that up again with a really solid performance here.
Only young, isn't he? I think is he 18 or?
I'm not sure how old, but I know that they extended his contract on good money before he played first grade.
Right.
So they see him as the future. But in the immediate future, I think Jamal Fogarty comes back in, plays alongside Ash Taylor. Toby Sexton is waiting in the wings.
Yeah. Warriors 18, West Tigers 16. I'm sorry, Tigers fans. It's been a long, long year. Another year that promised so much has unfortunately...
Shorter. Well, it will get shorter in 5 weeks.
They'll be on holidays if they can go anywhere.
Now, they led by only 10 and they had everything. They had field position, they had all the football. The Warriors hadn't turned up particularly well in the opening half hour, and they only led by 10, and that was corralled in fairly quickly by the Warriors, who, again, on the back of Tuivasa-Sheck leaving, Lisa Narmau leaving, so many players missing, Ewan Aitken, I think, went into the back row.
Peter Hickory played 5'8".
Peter Hickory played 5'8". They were there to be beaten, the Warriors, and the Tigers weren't good enough to do so. Just on the Warriors, I like Wade Egan. They've got Sean Johnson coming back next year. They've got Chanel Harris-Tavita will be available, and he's a good young player coming through. Cody Nikorima. I've always kind of thought that he might have been your ideal 14 or 15.
Changed the game, didn't he?
I think he's their 9. I like Wade Egan, but I think off-season you put the 9 on his back, and the players who've made a transition from the halves through history into the dummy half role it's star-studded. Andrew Johns, I think you'll find, played just as much representative football for Australia as with the 9 on his back. Then he didn't play dummy half a lot, but he had the 9 on his back. But there's been so many players that have made that successful transition. I think Cody Nikorima could be a class 9.
Starting 9?
A starting 9.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think that he's got good vision, good passing game, threw a couple of dusty ones here, but you get a full off-season under your belt just specialising in that position. I think that he could be a real force for them next year, because I think that Johnson will play alongside Harris-Tavita. Nikorima is ideal as an interchange player, but I see he could turn into a big minute number 9.
Let's look at the other 2 games. Monday footy and a couple of resounding results, both results going the way that we expected they would. Seagulls 40, Sharks 22. Tom Trbojevic, we're running out of adjectives and
superlatives.
He's just a phenomenon. And Rabbitohs 50, Dragons 14. Ben Hunt, broken arm. Might not see him again for the rest of the year. Hard to see the Dragons figuring in that 7th and 8th discussion, isn't it, Pete?
Well, they are in the discussion, but they paid the price. Now they had 4 players. They had 4 barbecuers out on the weekend, and they've had a poor couple of weeks since the Paul Vaughan incident.
Barbecuers, I like that.
Well, that's what they've contributed very much so to their own demise.
The ladder. We've been teasing the ladder the whole wrap here. Let's have a look. It's up on screen now. What can you tell me, mathematician Sterling?
Well, I can tell you that the battle for 4th position is going to be a beauty. The problem for the Seagulls is that they don't have a great for and against, although it has improved markedly. But the Seagulls, Parramatta have got, we keep talking about the tough run home. So I think that the 4th position is going to be a battle between the Roosters and the Seagulls.
Parramatta out of the... You're saying Parramatta won't make the 4?
Well, I don't think they can, not on what I've seen. And again, we start with South Sydney this weekend. They finished with Melbourne and Penrith. Not easy compared to what's just behind them. And the Manly side are only now 2 points behind both Parramatta and the Roosters. So I think probably in the end it's going to be a battle between Manly and the Roosters. But let's have a look at the battle for 7th and 8th. You can see Titans in 7th now, Sharks in 8th. Raiders, Dragons, Knights, all on 18 points. The differentials are really interesting. The Titans are minus 24, 34 points ahead of the Sharks. And we've got the Raiders and the Dragons both on the same amount. Look at that for the Knights, minus 147. So,
do you know what happens, Peter, if teams are tied in terms of points at the end of the year?
Let's firstly establish that if teams finish in the same amount of competition points, that differential will determine who finishes 7th and 8th. But if
the differentials are the same, it goes to a percentage.
Of course it does.
Which I worked out. I didn't even do maths in year 11 and 12, but I worked out that the percentage is calculated by dividing 4 over against. But the differential...
Not the number 4.
No.
The points that you score.
But, of course, if you've got the same differential, you could it makes it tricky.
Well,
so
I'm wondering, Matt, who would be favoured?
David Middleton told me this,
in
by
that
the way.
circumstance?
Well, the teams
would be?
that have conceded the least points
the
are
defensive
favoured
team.
by that formula.
There you go.
Thank you, Middo. And if I've got it wrong, ring David Middleton or tweet him because I had nothing to do with that.
And unless you are a professor, you have no idea what we just spoke about then. But what we are saying is that differential is absolutely huge when you have a logjam like we have. 5 rounds to go, 5 teams all on the same amount of competition points. And you look at the Titans on minus 24, the Knights minus 147. A lot of ground to make up in regards to that.
And to state the bleeding obvious, that loss to the Raiders on the weekend, you look at that later, that
big.
is massive. They could be 7th
Yep.
and a win above the pack. So that could be a season-defining loss. Some good games coming up this week. What are you looking forward to, Pete?
Saturday night, here on 9, we cover Saturday night for the next 5 weeks. Melbourne up against Manly.
Yes.
Yeah, and what about
Were you calling the night when Glenn Stewart and Adam Blair?
Yes, absolutely.
Gee.
Yeah, and since then, there's just always been a bit of feeling between these clubs, which obviously the Battle of Brookvale kind of highlighted. But yeah, so much riding on this one for Manly, and if they could beat Melbourne on Saturday night, then that top 4 spot it really is within their grasp.
All right, a big week of footy coming up here on Nine's Wild World of Sports. Thanks, Pete. We'll wrap it all up
Good fun,
again
Matt.
next week.
I'm still trying to work out differential and percentages and 4 over something.
Don't ask me. I've got no idea. See you later.